In this episode of Aquatic Oasis, we're making our own live rock. So, as promised, we're going to be making some live rock. Now, this is a much cheaper way of getting your collection of rocks together for your landscaping in your reef tank than it would be to go even just purchase dry rock. Now, the first ingredient you're going to need to make your live rock is cement, Portland cement. There is gray and white cement that you can purchase. The white's a little bit more expensive. This is just the gray that I'm using, as you can see. Now, once your rock is mixed and constructed and has been cured, it all looks the same. So save yourself some money and just go with this gray stuff. It works fine, especially once it's been matured a little bit. Now, I do have white Portland cement and have used it before. It literally looks the same after a month or two. So really, if it's worth paying that extra money to you, go for it. The second ingredient that you're going to need is some sort of crushed coral, substrate, gravel. A lot of people use oyster shell, which is a very cheap alternative. It also gives a nice texture. Very important for creating the live rock. The third ingredient you will need is rock salt. Now, I use both this finer salt as well as this much coarser, larger grain salt here. The fourth ingredient you're going to need is sand. You can get aquarium sand, you can get reef sand. I just get playground sand because it's cheap and you need a lot of the stuff. I ended up buying 4 bags and probably could have bought 2 more on top of that. So it's important because it's part of your mixture for the rock and it's what you're going to be using to create the mold for your rock to lay in and rest as it cures and dries. So here is the mixing station where we're going to be mixing the cement and sand and all of that for our live rock. This here is a big tub of sand. This is where we're actually going to make the rock. Now this will create a bed for the rock and cement to sit in and lay while it dries and cures, which can take a couple days. Now for our actual mixture, we will need 1 part sand. You will need 1 part crushed coral, aragonite, or even oyster shell, whatever your preference there. 2 parts Portland cement. So the sand has to be moist because you need it to clump up on you. So it needs that in order to work. The sand you're seeing is moist from the last batch that I made. Moisten it up. Get it damp, but not too much. Just enough to where it will clump in your fist a little bit. That there's about perfect.
Now when I just mix with my hands, rinse it off with the hose. Sometimes your hands are a little dry for the day, but that's about it. So if that bothers you, get some lotion or go buy some gloves, which kind of makes it harder to mix. In my opinion, it's just not worth it. But more importantly, the salt is going to go in after you add water to your cement. So once the cement is, once you've constructed your cement, then you add your water. And once you have it all mixed in thoroughly, go in and then add the salt. So I'll show you how that's done. The consistency of the cement needs to be kind of like peanut butter, maybe just a little runnier. If you go too thick and it dries, the cement won't bond to itself and it will kind of crumble and just create this thick gravel. That's why I use so much cement, is to make sure that it bonds. And because I'm using more salt than most people to make sure that the rock is porous, the cement is there to keep the integrity together. So you'll see how it turns out and I think you'll like it. But kind of watch how viscous I make this cement. If you add water slowly to the mixture, you can creep on to about, the texture and viscosity that you need. If you just throw a bunch of water in and it's too runny, you'll need to add additional elements to the mixture, additional ingredients to make sure you can get back to where you need. But then it becomes convoluted and kind of difficult to make sure you know exactly what you got.
Once your cement is mixed up and you're happy with the viscosity of it, go ahead and put in 1 part of the crushed up salt. And then you're going to follow that up with another part of the large pellet-like salt, or just large clumpy salt. So that's 2 parts salt altogether for this mixture.
The very first thing you need to do is get the sand out of the way. Now you need to have a good thick substrate for your rock, because if it dries out, the cement does not work properly. So get yourself a nice working space here. So we're gonna call that our base layout there, okay? And I'm actually gonna scoop some of this out. Just so I have more room in here. We'll use this later. Something with some good texture. And throw it. Now when you lift it up, you can see the impaction it made. And we're gonna keep making, we're gonna build off that. Rotate the rock. You got too much sand in a spot where you want it removed, pull it out. Keep going in. Now, do not do thin branches. Thin branches are a good way to fail. Your cement will lose its integrity with small branches and you won't be happy with it. So go as thick as you can. And your mold is going to be reverse what you're making it, so keep that in mind. And then if you can do some different branches and levels and maybe poke in it with your fingers, that creates some little peaks for your rock. And the more branches you have, the more space you'll have when you're aquaculturing. You'll have more platforms for placing rocks up against it. So that looks pretty good to me. That's kind of a nice little creative layout there. Now I kind of like the idea of the rock dipping down in the center. So I'm going to leave that little mound of sand right there. Using your fingers won't ruin anything either. That's a little thin, so let's thicken that up. Some sand. That's a little thin. Now to get a really nice texture with your rock, come in with it, and you don't plop it in. You don't just plop. You let it drizzle off your fingers. That's going to give you a much more organic look. Don't aggressively throw it in. Okay? What happens is the rock, or the salt that we added, will slowly dissolve during the freshwater curing, which will pull out a lot of the different chemicals and acid that will, from the limestone, that will essentially kill your reef tank if you don't let it cure. So that's probably a very important thing not to miss. I'm going to come in and start collapsing some of the sand in on our mixture here. But I'm not done. I'm going to keep going here. This is probably the largest rock I've ever made. So we'll see how it turns out. It may crumble and break apart when we pull it out. The longer you let it dry, often the better the outcome will be. Okay, so we got a nice little flat surface there. We now need to cover this in sand. Remember that sand is important, the moist sand, for keeping this cement hydrated so that it dries correctly. The amount of moisture present does not hinder the cement. In fact, it helps it. So since it's a chemical process, it's not a drying out of the cement per se that causes it to harden. Now I probably needed a little bit more sand on top, but since I don't have any more sand at the moment, I'm going to just throw a bag over this, or if you have a lid or something, you can do that. And that's just to hold the moisture in.
And now to let things dry. That can take anywhere from 3 days, 4 days, to even a week, maybe even a week and a half with the size of the rock that we made. Now here's a couple pictures of a rock that I made once before. I was pretty happy with it, and it's just an awesome little piece. If you like this, this is the process for you as far as making live rock. The purple you see here, that purple is the PVC primer that you use. Now it is toxic to fish when wet, but once it dries, it's perfectly fine to put in your reef tank. So if you need some color on your rock, that's a great way of doing it. Tune in to episode 2 once we get that posted to see how we cure this rock once it's finished drying to make it reef safe. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Hit the bell to always get notifications of our videos. And happy reefing from Aquatic Oasis.